Chapter 731, Gains. Illusory black threads emanated out of Signor's body and entered Klein's hands. With every jolt in spirituality, it gave a different reaction. In fact, there was no need to use both hands when controlling the spirit-body threads. Klein was just accustomed to doing so, as it gave him a feeling like he was truly controlling a puppet. From the looks of it, other marionettists can discover each other's marionettes. The Signor's abnormality can't be hidden from their eyes, so I have to be careful about this. Klein concluded the problems he discovered, and he quickly turned his thoughts back onto Signor. This Admiral of Blood was dead. His spirit body had become a vessel for the marionette, losing any traits that belonged to him. Therefore, many divination methods were ineffective against him. Of course, methods to seek his corpse were still effective. Klein planned on cleansing the wraith in the gray fog before using paper angels to envelop the mirror-like objects that he had possessed before placing him into a cigar case that was sealed by a wall of spirituality, along with Isaac's copper whistle. This created a 3-layered interference effect. This way, Klein believed that, even if the Rose School of Thought Angel wished to, it was impossible to use divination to lock onto his position via Admiral of Blood. As for whether the Mother Tree of Desire had left any back doors in Signor's body, he wasn't too worried. This was because, if that really happened, she could have mutated Signor during the demigod battle royale in order to deal with him. Based on the situation back then, there was a guaranteed chance of success. Mother Tree of Desire, or should I say the Chained God, strictly controls its organization's members. It relies on a vow contract and other methods that are ingrained into the soul. This can be inferred from Miss Sharon's descriptions and my interaction with the corresponding characteristics. As long as I don't attempt to use Admiral of Blood to divine the secrets of the Rose School of Thought or the potion formula of the mutant pathway, I wouldn't trigger any problems. The Werewolf Beyonder characteristic has remained normal, despite being above the gray fog for so long. Besides, there's still the gray fog cleansing process. If there are any latent problems, it should be washed out.
He thought for a while and took out Isaac's copper whistle from inside his body. He turned his right wrist and made the side with fewer patterns appear under the sunlight, making it reflect the light.
Immediately, the copper whistle had Signor's figure appear on it as it rapidly turned clear. The Admiral of Blood in front of Klein suddenly vanished as a result.
Perhaps the Mother Tree of Desire can use the vow contract and other methods to vaguely lock on, but that doesn't matter. She can sense the gray fog's unique trait on me anyway, and she will sense me once I'm within range. Besides, this marionette might be destroyed at any time when I use it as a shield. He was like a jobless tramp who was debt-laden. He felt that there was almost nothing he was afraid of. Of course, he really was debt-ridden. As long as I advance to a demigod and can hide my unique trait, it's fine losing marionettes.
Klein surveyed the area as he bent his back to pick up the silver necklace. He took 4 steps counterclockwise while chanting the incantations softly. This time he hadn't entered via summoning his spirit body, so he couldn't directly return. The grayish-white fog was quickly emanated as hysterical ravings and roars echoed for an eternity. Isaac's copper whistle didn't react abnormally, which meant that there weren't any latent problems with Admiral of Blood. Sitting at the end of the bronze table, Klein placed Isaac's copper whistle in front of him, making Signor, who was dressed in a dark red coat and old triangular hat, appear. He was like a butler, awaiting orders from his master. Klein asked, as though Admiral of Blood was still alive.
Do you have any other items on you?
This was his attempt to act as a marionettist. Following that, he controlled Signor, made him rummage through every pocket as he subsequently took out 325 pounds, 16 soldi, and 8 pence in cash. There were also 13 gold coins. Apart from that, perhaps due to his frequent act of transforming into a wraith state, Signor didn't carry anything else on him.
How poor. As a pirate admiral, you don't even have a single mystical item. Did you hand it over to the Rose School of Thought or your subordinates? Klein seriously considered cashing out Admiral of Blood via the black market. Just in loan alone, he was worth 42,000 pounds. Yes, claiming the bounty from loan isn't pragmatic. Be it the Church of Storms and the Kingdom's military, they will follow the clues to capture Gehrman Sparrow, who managed to embroil so many demigods in a battle royale, and then investigate the organization backing him. They wouldn't even pay, and they might even plant a trap. By the same logic, the churches and governments of other countries must have similar ideas. However, they might be easier to work with. Retrieving the bounty will require substantial risks. Besides, there's no rush. I'll send Senor out when I plan on switching marionettes. After all, being a marionette for a few days won't change his identity or value.
Klein reined in his thoughts and cast his gaze on the silver necklace with an ancient coin attached to it. He immediately used divination to gain the gist of its origins and usage. It came from a Sequence 5 winner from the Life School of Thought. After dying at the hands of a Rose School of Thought demigod, this gentleman's beyonder characteristic and psyche fused with an ordinary silver necklace that he carried with him, turning into a mystical item. As for the reason why the ordinary silver necklace would be carried by a Sequence 5 powerhouse for extended periods of time, Klein was unable to receive any effective revelations from it, as it had been too long and it had been corrupted. The mystical item had two uses. One was to passively make the wearer lucky. In their daily lifestyle, the owner would encounter good things, easily succeeding in whatever they did. When suffering a lethal blow or terrifying disaster, ridiculous scenes would happen, allowing them to be successfully rescued. The latter situation only lasted for 10 minutes. The second use was to actively give an enemy bad luck, making the target unlucky. Be it in daily life or combat, it was easy for them to experience failure due to some trivial problem. The corresponding negative effects of the necklace was the conservation of luck. After being lucky, they would immediately meet with repeated bad luck. They would be as unlucky as they were lucky before. It needed the wearer to be devoted and seriously avoid any danger. Otherwise, it was very easy for them to die in a comedic manner, and even harm people around them. The luck received in one's daily life would often revert back after a month. The user would end up unlucky, regardless of whether they wore it or not. However, such bad luck was slowly released, so it wasn't too dangerous. And luck obtained in combat would similarly strike back 10 minutes later in a similar vigor.
Overall, this is a rather good mystical item, but I don't have much use for it. After all, Fate Counselor Rakir was unable to change my luck. I'll just wear it on me for now. It has few negative effects on me. I'll sell it if there's a chance to pay off my debt with Miss Messenger. Miss Messenger wants gold coins, while I have gold pounds. It's nearly impossible to exchange 10,000 gold coins through the banks or official markets. From the looks of it, I'll have to do it in batches, getting each Tarot Club member to change some of it.
Klein soon decided on a plan as he casually came up with a name for the necklace, Scales of Luck. Following that, he cast his gaze onto Senor, who was standing reverently to his side. He began to study the powers a wraith had: forceful possession, enemy control, wraith's shriek, mirror blink, obstacle penetration, death-related spells, and invisibility that wouldn't be discovered by most mid- and low-sequence beyonders. Klein distinguished each power, and he matched them with Sharon's and Merrick's description, as well as his experience gained from combat. He soon concluded this, afraid that the candle in the outside world would finish burning. And a dark cave was extremely bad for the present, him who had a phobia of the dark. Dachiem. Klein immediately took out a paper figurine from the junk pile, and together with the Black Emperor card, he stirred some of the powers above the gray fog, turning it into an anti-divination, quote, angel. This angel rapidly spread its wings and wrapped around a gold coin. On its reflective side was Senor's figure. Then Klein brought the gold coin, Azek's copper whistle, death knell, and his suitcase back to the real world. As for Creeping Hunger and Grozel's travels, one of them hadn't been fed, and the other might cause Klein to be swallowed into the book for carrying it for too long. Therefore, they were left in the junk pile above the gray fog. Having returned to the cave, Klein hurriedly placed the gold coin and Azek's copper whistle into a cigar case before sealing it with a wall of spirituality. He cleaned up the scene, switched into formal clothes, and carried his suitcase. He followed the beach until he came to a residential area. He discovered that he was near Pritz Harbor. He didn't immediately return to Backland. Instead, he changed his appearance, took a steam locomotive, and headed for Conant City in Desi Bay. He planned on circling the area once before changing his identity again. Banzi Harbor. Alger Wilson looked at the destroyed city under the afternoon sun. He saw that the buildings had completely collapsed, and there were deep chasms in the ground and charred spots everywhere. Such a scene extended into the depths of the island. Even the mountain had collapsed. At that moment, there wasn't anyone from the Church of Storms watching the ruins, since there wasn't anything here. And the plans to rebuild the harbor wasn't brought forward at all. Alger jumped off the Blue Avenger and circled the ruins with his sailors, but they didn't discover anything of value.
Let's go.
He soon boarded the ship, which hoisted its sails and left the island. After an unknown period of time, a figure suddenly walked out from the depths of the ruins. He wore a double-breasted, pure black clerical robe. He had dark golden hair, and his facial features were clear and distinct, like an ancient classical sculpture without any wrinkles. His eyes were dark blue, nearing black. They looked lusterless, but they were filled with dense blood capillaries. Chapter 732, Destination. Desi County, Conant City, 67 Red Indus Street. Wearing a commonly seen face in the Lowen Kingdom, Klein took a step forward and rang the doorbell. In less than a minute, the door creaked open as a maidservant looked out and asked out of curiosity, "Pop Boer." "Good evening. Who might you be looking for?" "Pop Boer. I'm here to find Ma'am Nilu." "I'm a friend of her father, Davy Raymond," Klein answered calmly. Davy Raymond was the nightmare who he had released from creeping hunger. It was a red glove from the Nighthawks, and the first thing on his mind before he dissipated was his daughter, Nilu Raymond. He was very apologetic towards her for not spending time with her while she grew up, making her effectively lose her father when she had already lost her mother. Klein had promised him that he would make a visit to the beautiful coastal city if he had the chance to visit his daughter. Having probed for more information earlier, Klein had gained a general idea about Nilu Raymond's situation. After this girl graduated from grammar school, she worked at the Women and Children Care Foundation, which was run by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. She had a weekly salary of £2.10 solely and was the target of envy by her neighbors. She also inherited an inheritance from her businessman father. As for how much it was, no one knew. They just knew that she was richer than most people from the middle class. Typically speaking, women with such wealth would place great emphasis on their marriage. They would repeatedly select and observe candidates, resulting in their late marriage. However, Nilu had married to a civil servant just a year later. As both parties were believers of the Evernight Goddess, she didn't take on her husband's last name. She continued going by the name Nilu Raymond, and she continued staying at 67 Red Indus Street. After hearing Klein's answer, the maidservant quickly requested him to wait as she entered the living room to report to her mistress. Before long, a woman in a home dress walked to the door. She had black hair and blue eyes. Her face was rather thin, and she was rather pretty. She resembled Davy Raymond. "Good evening, sir. I'm Nilu, Davy Raymond's daughter." "May I know when you got to know my father?" Nilu Raymond asked politely but warily. Klein took off his hat and smiled. "I got to know him at sea. It's been several years." "She toffis pos-pols? My cages pos-pols." Nilu Raymond swept him with a wary gaze and said, "Perhaps you might not know, but he has already passed away." Klein sighed and replied, "Yes, I know. I got to know him through that disaster. He had some words to say back then which I didn't think too much about. However, the more I thought about it in recent years, the more I felt that I should inform you." "Is that so?" Nilu said softly. After some thought, she invited him. "Please come in. Would you mind if my husband listens in?" "Freesai." "This is up to you to decide," Klein frankly replied. Nilu nodded and led Klein into the study. Her husband had the looks of an ordinary civil servant with a gentleman's bearing. He put down his newspapers and followed them in. After both parties sat down, Klein looked at the couple on the sofa and deliberated. Mr. Davy Raymond once experienced disaster after another. He lost his father, mother, wife, brothers, and sisters. Nilu nodded with a deadpan expression. "I know." Klein thought and continued. "He appears to be a merchant, but he was in fact seeking out the murderers who caused that disaster." "I know." Nilu didn't object to it. Klein glanced at her and continued. "He dedicated himself to this matter, and he was very regretful that he didn't manage to spend time with you growing up, making you lose your father alongside your mother." Nilu fell silent for a second before she rapidly replied, "I know." Klein swept his gaze to the old books around him and sighed silently. "He said that his greatest wish was to see you enter the hall of marriage, under the witness of the goddess, to have your own family, and to not be lonely anymore. I believe he should be very happy right now, Nilu's gaze slowly moved away from Klein's face as she turned agape, answering only 2 seconds later. "I know." Klein leaned forward slightly as he clasped his hands. "He said that he might die at sea, and he wanted me to tell you that he died as a result of an accident. All the murderers from before have already been punished. You do not need to hate anyone. He also said that he loves you very much and that he's very sorry. Isem Zadia." Nilu remained silent for a few seconds as she blinked. She turned her head to the side and scoffed with an unclear attitude. "Got it." Klein gave her a deep look before getting up. "I'm done passing on the message. It's time I leave." Met with silence. Nilu's husband nodded gently as a gesture of thanks. Klein turned around, walked to the door of the study. Just as he twisted the doorknob, Nilu Raymond's voice sounded from behind him, deep and hoarse. "Mian, what kind of person do you think he was?" Klein fell silent for a second, turned his head, and curled his lips. "Ho," he said with a smile, "a guardian." He didn't stay any longer as he opened the door and walked to the coat rack. When he wore his hat and left 67 Red Indus Street, soft, restrained sobbing suddenly drilled into his ears. Shaking his head silently, Klein left the borough and entered a cathedral of the Evernight Goddess. Passing through the dark and serene aisle, he sat in the 7th row from the back. He faced the crimson half-moon and the black sacred emblem filled with resplendent stars. He took off his hat, lowered his head, and held his hands to his mouth, just like the many believers present. While praying silently in the silence and tranquility, time quickly passed. Klein slowly opened his eyes as he gently stood up. At the spot where he sat, he left behind an item wrapped in paper. Klein walked along the aisle and left the prayer hall, going straight to the cathedral's entrance. With his back facing the hall, he wore his hat, raised his right hand, and snapped his fingers. Pah! The paper suddenly ignited where he sat, garnering the priest's attention. When this gentleman rushed over, the flames had already extinguished, leaving behind a dark gem-like item. This is... Although the priest didn't know what the item was, his spiritual perception told him that it was very important. When he and the other priests rushed outside the cathedral, the gentleman in a tailcoat and half-top hat had already disappeared. The next morning, through a local black market, Klein had obtained a new identity as he came to the steam locomotive station. In his hand was a second-class ticket worth 18 soldi, as well as identification documents for himself. He held a black leather suitcase as he stood at the platform with his back straight, awaiting the arrival of the train headed for Backland. The present him was a middle-aged man who was nearing his 40s. He was slightly more than 180 centimeters tall, and his black hair had a few silver strands. His deep blue eyes were like a lake at night, and he was rather good-looking. He gave off mature and elegant vibes. Looking down at the identification documents, Klein's eyes reflected his present name, Dwayne Dantes. After some thought, he placed the suitcase on the ground, laid it down, and opened it before stuffing all his identification documents inside. Inside the suitcase, there was a black wooden box containing the former Lowen soldier, Frunziar Edwards' ashes. Moments after arranging his suitcase, he heard a whistle. A steam train chugged into the station, spewing smoke before it slowed down to a halt. He looked up and cast his gaze forward as he examined it in silence. Then he looked down at his suitcase and whispered, "Hiss, beep, then it's time to return. Mom." He then stood straight, carried his belongings, and walked to the open carriage door. Pause. Backland, Chairwood Borough, 26 Gunstead Street. Benson took off his hat, removed his coat, and handed it to the maidservant. He looked at his sister, Melissa, who was glued to her book in the living room. The entrance examinations are in June. You'll finally experience the pain of studiously studying that I endured back then. Melissa didn't look up as she continued reading. Mashi, I'm studiously studying every day. Mashi, a little humor, Melissa, a little humor. What's the difference between a person without humor and a curly-haired baboon? Benson said with a smile. Melissa casually glanced at him and said, That wasn't what you said in the past. She didn't correct him on what the exact difference was between humans and curly-haired baboons, and she instead said, Do civil servants also finish work so late? No, there's been a lot of work recently. As you know, oh, you don't. In such a huge reform, the handing over of work and the straightening out of different relationships are very troublesome. Benson swept the mirror in the living room. He couldn't help but lift his hand to comb his hair as he said with a look of displeasure, Although I'm only a low-ranking employee in the Ministry of Finance, that doesn't stop me from having plenty of work. The only thing to be happy about it that I finally survived the darn probationary period. I'll soon have a weekly salary of £3. Melissa put down her book and she walked to the dining hall and said to Benson, It's dinner time. She paused and said very seriously, I read in the papers that there's something called Donningsman tree sap that has a significant effect on boosting hair growth. Benson's face immediately had mixed expressions. Pause. Whoosh! Amidst the whistle, the long steam locomotive chugged into Backland. Klein picked up his suitcase and once again stepped into the capital of capitals, the land of hope. He discovered that the smog had thinned significantly, and there wasn't the obvious palish yellow colors. The gas street lamps on the platform were already turned on, dispersing the gloominess and darkness. Surveying the area, Klein walked out the steam locomotive station, took the metro and a carriage, and came to a Church of Storms cemetery outside Westboro. Then, he spent a little bit of money and placed Frunziar Edwards' ashes into a partition. By then, this lone soldier had already left Backland for more than 165 years. After taking a step back, Klein observed it for a moment before using a pen and paper to engrave something on the partition door. Frunziar Edward. He closed his eyes and added, Every journey has its destination.
Chapter 733, The Return. Under a persistent rain, mingled with the thin fog, the rows of street lamps tried their hardest to shine through the mist. The occasional horse carriage that proceeded down the streets was a common evening sight in Backland. Apart from these, Klein noticed a few gratifying changes while standing behind the window. Ring. A crisp sound echoed in the air as a two-wheeled mechanical device rushed down the side of the street to the other end of the street. Its frame was black in color, with some parts revealing grayish-white steel. Under the illumination of the street lamps and rain, it sparkled with the beauty of metal. On this device sat a man dressed in a postman's uniform. He kept pedaling with his legs, apparently using a great deal of strength. Behind him was a wooden box that had been painted in green.
It's been promoted very well.
The white shirt, black-vested, mature-looking Klein sighed inwardly when he saw this scene. In a few hours within his return to Backland, he noticed many similar mechanical devices, and they were none other than the bicycles that he had promoted and invested in. From the newspapers, Klein knew that the Backland Bike Company had done tons of advertisements. It even held a bicycle competition in boroughs like Sherwood and Backland Bridge so as to garner the attention of others. Apart from that, they also actively promoted it to the government departments such as the Postal Service and the police departments. The results were said to be pretty good. Their pricing strategy had followed Klein's original suggestion, avoiding the middle-upper class who often used horse carriages. Instead, They aimed their target audience at those with weekly salaries of £1.10 solely and above, such as technical workers, students with a decent family background, and clerical employees that often needed to travel outside. Therefore, a bike worth £3 to £5 was affordable for the people in this demographic if they bit the bullet a little. And at the same time, they could flaunt it to the masses who had incomes that were lower than them.
The current issue is that Backlund often rains. It's difficult to hold an umbrella while riding a bicycle. The next step should be a raincoat.
Klein retracted his gaze, shook his head, and chuckled. The place he stayed at was a high-end hotel in the Hillston borough. It cost him 10 soldi a night, making him feel quite the pinch. However, to match his persona, all he could do was bite the bullet and put up with it. His idea of Dwayne Dantes was that he was a believer of the Evernight goddess and a mysterious tycoon that came from Desi Bay. He had sold his original land and mines, planning to seek out brand new opportunities in Backlund. He had a certain level of interest in obtaining an aristocratic title, but he didn't have the abundant wealth to do so. He had to first expand his social circle and begin making some investments. The benefits of this identity was that it was clearly different from the characters Klein had previously acted as. It allowed him to very naturally interact with people from the middle-upper class, especially members of the Military Officers Club and the Backlund Diocese bishops of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. It made it convenient for Klein to continue his investigations into the Great Smog of Backlund while gathering intel before he made detailed plans to steal the Antigonus family's notebook. There were obvious disadvantages as well. Such a mysterious tycoon would definitely catch the notice of the Nighthawks and mandated punishers, so there was a certain level of background checks that he would have to undergo. According to Klein's experience, such an investigation would be done by the official Beyonder organizations under the premise that nothing important had happened. It could also be handed over to the police department, but in summary, not too much effort would be put into it, as it would be considered a routine check. Therefore, Klein, who was considered quite an expert at disguises, had prepared a second layer to his identity as Dwayne Dantes to his designs, so as to deal with the background inspection. This second layer to his identity was that Dwayne Dantes was a person who had adventured in the southern continent's east and west Balam for some particular reason. He had used a nickname, and he spent more than 10 years in that rather dangerous land filled with opportunity in order to amass a great deal of wealth. Since the origin of his wealth wasn't overboard, he had secretly returned to Desi Bay, and he forged a new identity. He had planned on beginning a new life in Backlund and gradually legalize his wealth. It wasn't rare to see such people on loan. Their stories were acceptable and imaginable for an investigation. For this identity layer, Klein had left some inconspicuous clues in Conant City so as to indirectly reveal the truth. These clues included but were not limited to the stubs of his scalped tickets from East Balam to Conant City, habits as a result of living in the southern continent for extended periods of time, as well as his wealth of unknown origins. Klein believed that as long as Dwayne Dantes didn't involve himself in any serious Beyonder matters, preparations such as this were enough to fool most routine background inspections. And if he encountered an extremely dedicated official Beyonder who investigated it all the way and was even willing to seek the help of colleagues from the southern continent, then Dwayne Dantes had a third identity layer. It was that he was a cheat who had anti-divination measures to a certain degree. He disguised himself as a mysterious tycoon and spent large amounts of money in investments for this final scam. This identity was enough to get Dwayne Dantes arrested, but the level of attention placed on him wouldn't be too great. This allowed Klein to exit the stage without much trouble.
Compared to my first time in Backlund, the creation of a three-layered identity shows how I've really matured significantly.
Klein slowly walked to the middle of the room as he cast his gaze on a full-body mirror in the corner. His reflection had black hair and some strands of gray hair. His eyes were deep, but his experiences had left indelible marks on his face. He was a charming middle-aged man with a mature bearing. The design of Dwayne Dantes' identity wasn't difficult for the present Klein. However, stealing the Antigonus family's notebook from behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Cheney's Gate was practically an impossible task for any external Beyonder. Even a king of angels couldn't guarantee success. Of course, unlike other Beyonders, Klein had two advantages. First, he was once a Nighthawk. He had quite a good understanding of the internal procedures they followed. and he knew which matters he could exploit. Therefore, the first solution he eliminated was to become a particular Nighthawk, infiltrate it, and find a chance to pass through Cheney's Gate. There was a problem that existed in this. Nighthawks weren't able to randomly enter Cheney's Gate, even for the captains and deacons. Something had to happen first before they received the corresponding authority. Furthermore, Cheney's Gate had its keepers inside. Randomly entering or taking things would result in an attack on him, causing a battle to break out. Klein didn't wish for his theft to result in any deaths or injury to the members of the Church of the Goddess. After careful consideration, he placed his sights on the keepers. These elders were retired Nighthawks who volunteered to enter Cheney's Gate. They were in charge of watching the sealed artifacts, and they were from a different department from the Nighthawks. They entered and exited using the underground passageway through the cathedral, and they never interfered with the Nighthawks' work, nor would they be disturbed by the Nighthawks. Perhaps a result of staying behind Cheney's Gate for extended periods of time, these keepers all had certain traits. They had cold auras and had deadpan expressions. Their skin was pale, and they resembled monsters from the deep darkness who were on the border of life and death. Klein believed that it wasn't difficult for him to locate his target if he met one. His initial plan was to rent a place in Northborough near St. Samuel Cathedral. He would hire a butler, a valet, a maidservant, a gardener, a chef, and a carriage driver to have a front as a tycoon. Then, he would often head to the cathedral to pray piously, participate in Mass, donate money, and familiarize himself with the bishops and priests. During this process, he would work hard to find suspected keepers. He would choose 2 or 3 targets and observe their habits. When the opportunity arises, he would imprison one of them, change into his appearance or directly possess him, pass through Cheney's Gate, and attempt to flip through or take the Antigonus family's notebook away. This was a very crude plan that was merely a train of thought. It needed to be perfected according to the intelligence Klein would slowly acquire. For this matter, Klein's second advantage was the Tarot Club. He had assistants that the Church of the Evernight Goddess and the Nighthawks would never think of. Furthermore, he could consider extending the recruitment of a Backlund Diocese Nighthawk or Keeper into the gathering. He could then complete the theft through this traitor, just like how Emperor Roselle was used to obtain the Antigonus family's notebook by Zeratul.
I've got to frequently head to the cathedral. Only by doing so can I find a target.
Klein faced the mirror as he silently nodded. It had to be said that he felt conflicted. If a true Nighthawk or Keeper were to betray the church to serve Mr. Fool, his first thought was to unleash divine punishment to get rid of this despicable traitor. After exhaling, he gave a self-deprecating laugh. He wore his double-breasted frock coat and hat, walked out the room, and reached the streets. With an umbrella, he circled to another street. Taking advantage of the distant street lamp and the drizzle, he suddenly changed back into Sherlock Moriarty. Glancing at his wrinkled trousers, Klein stopped a carriage and planned on heading to Isengard Stanton's house in Helstonborough. Half an hour later, the somewhat ancient and dark building appeared before Klein's eyes. He paid 2 solely for his ride as he walked steadily around the puddles amidst the drizzle that refracted the yellowish light of dusk before coming to the famous detective's doorstep. Putting away his umbrella, he reached out to ring the doorbell and waited for a moment before seeing a man with a wide face open the door. The man had a head of malt-colored hair, grayish-blue eyes, and high cheekbones. He had the traits of someone from Lemberg or Mason.
Mr. Isengard Stanton's new assistant? Someone from the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom.
Klein took off his hat and said with a smile,
Good evening. Is Mr. Isengard Stanton home?
He is. He just had his dinner after a busy day at work.
The malt-colored lad replied politely.
May I know who you are?
Klein chortled and said,
Tell the good detective that a friend of his has returned from his vacation.
The young man was taken aback as he blurted out,
Mr. Sherlock Moriarty?
Chapter 734, Old Friends.
You actually know me. This means that Mr. Isengard Stanton often mentions me as a friend, or does it mean that the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom knows that I was embroiled in the great smog of Backlund?
Klein smiled as he nodded in an unperturbed manner.
Yes, I'm Sherlock Moriarty.
The grayish-blue-eyed lad immediately gave way as he warmly gestured him in.
Mr. Stanton has been worried about you all this time. He was afraid that you met with trouble. He can now be at peace.
Klein handed him his umbrella as he took off his hat and coat while walking in. At this moment, Isengard Stanton, who had sensed something, had put down his papers and pipe, and he left his reclining chair to take a look.
Oh my Sherlock, you're finally back. It's been so long, my friend.
The thin Isengard with grayed sides revealed a smile as he came over with welcoming arms in an attempt to give him a greeting hug. Klein wasn't used to such a custom, so he forced himself to reciprocate it and smile.
Mr. Stanton, this isn't something a believer of wisdom would do.
The bishops and priests of the god of knowledge and wisdom had their pride, and they seldom gave greeting hugs. But in fact, apart from the boorish Fasak Empire and the liberal Intis Kingdom, such a manner of etiquette was rare in other countries and regions. It only happened among very familiar friends. Isengard took 2 steps back and chuckled.
No, Sherlock. We're never stingy with respect and friendliness towards intelligent friends. In my heart, you're one of the top 5 detectives in all of Backland.
I like that.
Klein smiled inwardly as he retorted in jest.
So you're one of the top 3 detectives?
To be praised as having true wisdom by a sequenced 7 believer of the god of knowledge and wisdom was really delighting.
I wish that you share the same thoughts as myself.
Isengard skillfully and gently replied. Then, he invited him to the living room and to the sofa. He leaned into a reclining chair and picked up his pipe. With a deep breath, he exhaled.
I'm very happy that nothing bad happened to you. You seem especially fine, both in body and mind. How was it? Was Desi Bay fun?
Klein had already prepared an excuse as he calmly smiled.
In fact, I didn't go to Desi Bay. I ended up going to Constant. I was previously embroiled in some trouble in Backland, so I could only find a place to hide.
Sherlock Moriarty was a gentleman from mid-Seashire who had a slight accent. It was a very normal choice to return to his hometown after causing trouble. Constant was mid-Seashire's capital.
I know.
Isengard replied heavily. He didn't inquire about the trouble which Sherlock had involved himself in. Instead, he said with a smile.
In short, welcome back to Backland. Come to me if you need any help.
Klein didn't stand on ceremony as he immediately said.
The purpose of my visit was first, because it really has been a while since we last met, and second, I wish that you can sell my shares in the Backland Bike Company on my behalf. All the documents are in place, and there's no need to carry out any other procedures.
In order to act as a mysterious tycoon and to repay Miss Messenger with the 10,000 gold coins, not only did he plan on selling items he had little use for, but he also planned on letting go of the last 10% of his shares in the Backland Bike Company. After all, Sherlock Moriarty wasn't able to appear in a legitimate fashion for a long period of time.
Are you really going to sell it?
Isengard stroked his pipe and said,
Although I've never been a businessman, I can tell that the bike is a product that's of great value and something that can be promoted on a large scale. Its commercial future is like the newly risen sun, and it has yet to reach its limits. You'll be losing plenty of money by selling it now.
That's why a buyer will be very willing to raise the price significantly, because of this expected value.
Klein chuckled.
I believe the people who can tell the value of the bike and its future aren't in the minority, and Framis and Leopard are definitely unwilling to reduce any part of their holdings at this stage. There shouldn't be a problem selling my 10% shares at twice or thrice the normal price. Isengard, the pricing of shares isn't about the present, but about its future.
Klein silently added inwardly.
To illustrate an alluring story for the buyer and investor, and drawing a beautiful future is very necessary. Of course, the value and future of the bike don't require additional input from me. Anyone with any business sense can tell. The only problem stems in the rubber production.
The pricing of shares isn't about the present, but about its future.
Isengard softly repeated Klein's words, and after a moment he sincerely sighed.
Sherlock, perhaps you should be involved in the business world. However, there will always be many accidents present.
To dare to take risks is equivalent to chivalry in business. Oh well, I admit that I've recently been in dire need of large sums of cash.
Klein replied with a smile. Isengard picked up his pipe as he gave it a satisfactory suck.
You've convinced me. I will specially hire a lawyer and accountant to confirm the market value of Backland Bike Company. Then, I'll add on an estimate of the expected profits and sell that 10% of yours. The corresponding fees and taxes will be deducted from the amount received. Oh. How should I contact you? It seems like your rental contract for the house at Minsk Street has lapsed.
Klein obviously wouldn't expose his present identity. He said, having prepared for it.
You can post news on the Tussock Times, Backland Daily Tribune, and other newspapers about the sale of the shares to make more people know. Only when there's competition would there be better price negotiations. When it's sold, you can publish a notice to indicate that the deal has been closed and that further inquiries won't be entertained. And when I see that notice, I'll come visit you.
Isengard was no stranger when it came to communicating over published notices in the newspapers. He nodded and said,
No problem. Of course, all expenses will be deducted from the final sum received.
With his main goal accomplished, Klein stood up and reached out his hand.
Thank you for your help, Isengard. I need to leave. We can talk in the future.
Isengard didn't hold him back as he sent him straight out the door. Klein circled to a nearby street and took a carriage to the Bravehearts Bar as he admired Bravehearts Bar's night view in the drizzle. He planned on re-establishing all the news and resource channels which Sherlock Moriarty used to have. After entering the noisy bar, he didn't head for the bar counter to order some beer and make inquiries. Instead, he circled around the boxing ring in preparation to leave, so that he could wait for Miss Sharon to appear on the carriage outside. At this moment, the door to a billiard room creaked open. Ian, with an old coat, walked out with newspapers in hand. His red eyes did a cursory sweep when he suddenly noticed a familiar figure. He gaped his mouth, but he didn't say his name. He greeted in pleasant surprise.
Good evening, sir. Is there anything I can help you with?
Not for now. I'm only here to visit an old friend.
Klein smiled warmly. As he spoke, he noticed that the papers in Ian's hand was news at sea. On it was a striking headline. Shocking. Crazy adventurer made a fugitive. Crazy adventurer. Klein intuitively believed that it had nothing to do with him. Ian noticed his gaze and raised the newspapers with a smile.
This is one of the rare up-to-date reports from News at Sea, because the bounties have already appeared in various places. The crazy adventurer German Sparrow plotted to bring harm on the City of Generosity, and he has been proven to be a member of a cult. In this incident, thanks to the Church of Storms and the military, no one from Bayam was injured, but Admiral of Blood Senior, who was involved in the matter, vanished as a result. It's suspected that he has been killed by German Sparrow. Guess how much of a bounty they are offering for German Sparrow? £50,000. It has exceeded Admiral of Blood's, and it's almost reached that of Admiral Hell's.
£50,000. Klein's heart stirred. He calmed the palpitations in his heart as he replied with a smile.
Unfortunately, few people can claim such a bounty.
He pointed at the bar's entrance and said,
I'll come to look for you again when I have the time.
All right.
Ian didn't ask further as he mentioned in passing.
Is Mr. White from the Harvest Church your friend?
That fellow Emlyn is finally willing to get out of the house? For those primordial moon believers?
Klein nodded.
That's right.
After saying that, he squeezed through the crowd and pushed open the door to leave the Bravehearts Bar. After getting onto a rental carriage, Klein cast his gaze outside, awaiting Miss Sharon's appearance. Of course, he wasn't certain that she was here. Months had passed, so it was very possible that this lady and Merrick had switched their area of activity. Silently, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered as he turned to look at the window. On the glass which could reflect the night view, a young lady in a black bonnet and Gothic-style black dress clearly appeared. Turning his head, Klein saw Miss Sharon sitting opposite him. Her pale blonde hair, blue eyes, and pale expression didn't seem any different from before.
Good evening.
Klein, who no longer needed to act as German Sparrow, greeted first. Sharon got up a little and curtsied. Realizing that she might have read news at sea, He was momentarily unable to find a topic for small talk. He cleared his throat and directly said,
I killed Senor.
Okay.
Sharon nodded slightly, indicating that she was aware. Klein smiled as he continued.
If Merrick still needs the Beyonder characteristic of a wraith, he can wait and prepare the money needed. Once I find a replacement, I'll sell Senor to him.
Sharon didn't ask what replacement meant as she replied.
After seeing that piece of news, he has been awaiting your return.
Very good.
Klein chuckled. He reached out for his collar, pulled out a silver necklace, and said,
Senor's lucky item. You should know about it, right?
Sharon tersely answered as she waited for Klein to continue.
I plan to sell either this or the biological poison bottle. Would you, or people from your circle, be interested?
Klein took the initiative to ask. Chapter 735, Another Visit. Sharon was silent for 2 seconds before she said,
I'll help ask.
It means you need to consider it? That's right. The negative effects of scales of luck does leave one hesitant. However, biological poison bottle is really compatible with a wraith. If it wasn't because I'm short on money and how it lowers my immunity, making me easily fall sick, I wouldn't be willing to sell it. It's rather effective in an ambush.
Klein vaguely grasped Sharon's intentions as he stuffed the silver necklace back into his collar. He asked after some thought,
Which power of a high-sequence prisoner pathway Beyonder makes all surrounding lifeless items attack one's target?
Puppet?
Sharon succinctly replied.
It's the power of a Sequence 4 puppet? Turning themselves into a lifeless puppet so that they are able to control all lifeless objects in a certain range. Advancing further, will they be able to directly influence the mystical items of an enemy?
Klein nodded in enlightenment and asked,
Then, do you know that demigod?
He immediately described in detail the appearance of the elder who had attacked him outside by him.
Shanks.
Sharon calmly said a name.
I actually wish that you could share with me more about him.
Klein knew Miss Sharon's style as he said with an exasperated smile.
Then, do you know Zatwin?
He was the mentor of the naturism sect's leader in Oravi Island.
The demigod who is pursuing us.
Sharon answered without hiding anything or any emotions, like a doll.
That's the one who made me feel like the chairs, tables, and curtains wished to kill me. What a coincidence. However, it wasn't arranged. It just proves that as a secret organization, the Rose School of Thought, with a history of over 1,000 years, doesn't have that many demigods. Perhaps it has about the same number as the Aurora Order. The number of saints number around 5, and the number of angels and Grade Zero sealed artifacts number about 2 to 3. Of course, this is also because they were suppressed by the 7 major churches, reducing their headquarters to colonies. At the height of their powers, they might have had far more than these.
Klein thought and asked again.
Then, do you know the Rose School of Thought member that is able to make an entire mountain tremble with just one arm?
He planned on describing the arm's traits, but he realized that he hadn't dared to look straight at it. Sharon listened quietly as her eyes darted around as though they came to life. She asked with a clear voice,
What did you encounter?
A saint, an angel, as well as Sea King, an Aurora Order demigod, a monster byproduct from the Numinous Episcopate's artificial death.
Klein silently made a self-deprecating comment as he said with a wry smile.
I got on the bad side with the Mother Tree of Desire, and I suffered an ambush from the Rose School of Thought. Thankfully, I was in Bayam, allowing the Church of Storms and the Kingdom's military to take action. I also threw out an item corrupted with the True Creator's aura, as well as something related to the Numinous Episcopate. In short, it was chaos, and I took the opportunity to escape.
He replied frankly, apart from hiding the existence of Miss Messenger and Mr. Azek. As for the matter of the True Creator, he believed that Miss Sharon had long known that he wasn't affected by the ravings. This could be explained by a timely psychological intervention or psychic treatment.
Mother Tree of Desire?
Sharon murmured the name as rare emotional upheavals slowly appeared in her eyes. Klein didn't have the interpretation abilities of a spectator, and he was unable to tell what was exactly on Sharon's mind. He could only sense that she felt a little fear and loathing. Sharon quickly restrained her abnormal reaction, turning back into an extremely exquisite doll. She looked at Sherlock Moriarty and said,
You are very lucky and very mysterious.
Klein smiled without a word, neither lying nor explaining. Sharon didn't inquire as she said,
You might have met Sua. He is an abomination born 922 years ago and claims to be the son of the chained god. He is also the present leader of the Rose School of Thought.
No way. The Rose School of Thought sent its leader and a demigod to deal with me. I'm just a mere Sequence 5. If not for Orange Light Hilarian's warning, I might have already been captured by the Rose School of Thought.
Klein felt a chill run down his back again as he asked,
Is Abomination the name of the Prisoner Pathways Sequence 2 or Sequence 1?
Probably.
Sharon didn't give an affirmative answer. At this moment, without waiting for Klein's response, she said,
William Street has been destroyed.
Klein had pondered what kind of reaction he should have when Miss Sharon raised the topic, so he immediately frowned.
By who? When did it happen?
The Nighthawks and Machinery Hive Mind, about 2 months ago.
Sharon had clearly gathered the corresponding intelligence. Klein nodded solemnly and, after some deep thought, said,
Perhaps we've neglected something. That evil spirit didn't need us to rescue it. It was still controlling Baronet Pound. Could it be that something happened to that gentleman, incurring the notice of the Nighthawks and Machinery Hive Minds?
Klein offered a guess filled with half-truths without utmost confidence. Sharon nodded.
Baronet Pound died during one of his revelries.
That's it? That's the end to Alista Tudor's final bloodline?
Klein thought and said,
How's the situation with William Street at the moment?
Sharon described without much of an expression.
Some high-rise buildings are being built. People monitored it in secret at the beginning, but the surveillance decreased with time, diminishing to 0 early last month.
Klein pondered for a few seconds and said,
Have you gone down to explore it?
Sharon's eyes swept his face.
No.
This is her remembering our unwritten agreement. To explore it together because we found it together? What a noble-hearted lady. The Rose School of Thought's Temperance faction is infinitely times better than the Indulgence faction.
Klein probed.
Shall we go now?
All right.
Sharon succinctly expressed her stance. Klein immediately instructed the carriage driver, and he changed the destination to William Street at the intersection of Westborough and Empressborough. Along the way, he casually mentioned what he heard and saw at sea, as well as the experiences that didn't involve his secrets. Although Sharon didn't answer him, she listened attentively, seemingly interested. This made Klein recall the time when he first got to know her as Miss Bodyguard. She sat on the illusory high-back chair in the oriel window's glass. Her right hand held her cheek as she seriously listened to his conversation with Ian. She had great potential in being a spectator. The carriage passed through the silent streets in the drizzle before finally arriving near William Street. Without approaching the area, Klein and Sharon discovered that the area had become a huge work site. After circling to the region that matched the underground ruins, they stood behind a huge tree with a lush canopy. Klein said to Sharon, who wasn't drenched by the rain despite not holding an umbrella,
Let's head down.
As the rain fell, they passed through Sharon's blonde hair and body before hitting the ground.
All right.
Sharon didn't ask how Sherlock Moriarty was planning on heading down with her. Klein reached his hand into his pocket and easily removed the wall of spirituality, and he opened the iron cigar case. Beside him, a figure suddenly appeared. It was none other than Admiral of Blood Senior, who wore a dark red coat and an old triangular hat. Klein said with a smile,
He will head down in my stead.
Immediately following that, he controlled his marionette in a composed manner. Senior immediately pressed his hand to his chest and bowed at Sharon.
Good evening. I'm honored to work with you.
Sharon swept her gaze across Klein and Senor, and without a word, her body sank into the soil.
Miss Sharon seems to detest Senor quite significantly.
Klein curled his lips and made Admiral of Blood rapidly turn into a wraith and sink. As for himself, he leaned on a tree, half closed his eyes as he seriously controlled the marionette. There wasn't anyone around him, and the drizzle was light and the streetlights dim. Slowly, Klein found the feeling of being a marionettist. His vision and Senor's vision overlapped with one another as he saw black-brown soil, squirming worms, and miscellaneous items in between the rocks. As they passed through layers of obstacles, they arrived at the region where the ruin once was. The dome ceiling had collapsed and the stone columns had snapped. The area was filled with soil and rubble, looking nothing like it once was. Such a scene made Klein believe that the humanoid statues of the 6 deities had been completely destroyed. To his joy, their location was relatively close to the room which sealed the evil spirit. That meant that he didn't need to worry that any subsequent exploration would exceed the 100-meter range for the control of his marionette. Amidst the smell of soil and rot, they soon entered the previously menacing room. However, between the rubble and soil, there were only a few signs of crushed bone and rotting clothes. The dark gold and deep blue light from before had all vanished.
The Beyonder characteristics have been taken away by the Nighthawks and machinery hive mind.
Senor's expression twitched as it perfectly reflected Klein's mood. Sharon turned around in the dark, solid environment and gently shook her head.
They didn't send anyone in. There are no traces of living creatures existing in here.
That's right. If a living person had entered and exited this room over the past half-year, a wraith should be able to sense it. Besides, the deity statues obviously cannot be seen by the Nighthawks and machinery hive mind. Where did those Beyonder characteristics go?
As Klein frowned, Senor had a similar reaction.
Could it be that the evil spirit wasn't completely obliterated? It had long escaped?
Klein thought about it when he suddenly came to an alarming conclusion. He held back his emotions and made Senor pass through the soil and rubble-filled room with Sharon, and they arrived at the spot where the bloody door previously stood. And at that moment, only a few splinters proved that it existed before. After proceeding forward a few meters, the two truly entered the room where the evil spirit was sealed. It had likewise been destroyed and buried. Klein used Senor's body and eyes to look for clues as he flew about.
There should be a black high-back chair here.
Sharon stopped and pointed at the splinters above 2 rocks. Klein instantly recalled the scene he had once seen in the dream. The young man suspected of being Medici had sat on a high-back chair, his head drooped low as though dead. Sharon didn't pause. She continued proceeding in the compressed soil in search for any traces. Suddenly, she spoke again.
There should be one here.
Another one? A second black high-back chair?
Klein floated over in surprise.